A strange change begins quietly, often long before anyone else can notice it. The things that once gave you a clear sense of direction slowly begin to feel different. A goal that once consumed your thoughts no longer creates the same urgency. Certain ambitions that once felt essential start losing their importance. Even the version of yourself you spent years building can begin to feel unfamiliar, as if you are slowly separating from an identity that once defined you. Nothing dramatic has happened. There may be no single event that explains it. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, something within you has started to shift. The confusing part is that transformation rarely feels like transformation while it is happening. It often feels like uncertainty, like losing your way, or standing between who you were and who you are becoming. The mind naturally searches for something solid to hold on to, because change creates discomfort when we cannot immediately understand where it is leading. We look for proof, visible progress, and clear answers, while the deepest changes often begin in places no one else can see. This is a struggle the Stoics explored deeply, learning to accept what is changing while developing the wisdom to respond with clarity rather than resistance. Perhaps the uncertainty you feel is not evidence that you are moving away from the life you want. Perhaps it is a sign that old fears, attachments, and expectations are slowly losing their control over you. Before circumstances change, your relationship with those circumstances begins to change first. Before a new chapter becomes visible, there is often a quiet period where the old one no longer feels like home. And within that space, where it may seem like something is being lost, a different kind of strength is beginning to take shape. There was a time when uncertainty felt almost impossible to tolerate. A delayed response from someone could create hours of unnecessary worry. An opportunity that did not arrive when expected could make you question whether you were even on the right path. A plan that failed to unfold according to your expectations could feel like evidence that something had gone wrong. The mind naturally looks for patterns, explanations, and control because uncertainty creates discomfort. When you do not know what is coming, the instinct is often to hold tighter, push harder, and attempt to remove every possibility of disappointment before it happens. But slowly, through experience and reflection, something begins to change. You start noticing that the constant need to control every detail does not actually create security. It only creates exhaustion. You still care about your goals. You still want to improve your circumstances. You still put effort into becoming better than you were yesterday. The difference is that your relationship with uncertainty begins to transform. You no longer feel the same desperation to force every outcome into existence. A person can work hard without constantly fighting reality. They can pursue something meaningful while accepting that certain parts of the journey will never fully belong to them. This is one of the most difficult forms of discipline because it requires strength in two different directions at the same time. You must have enough determination to take action, but enough wisdom to recognize where action ends and acceptance begins. Many people understand effort, but fewer understand surrendering the parts they were never meant to carry. This distinction was central to Stoic philosophy. The Stoics spent their lives examining the boundary between what belongs to human choice and what belongs to the unpredictable nature of life. Epictetus expressed this principle clearly. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. The wisdom behind this idea is simple, but its practice requires discipline. A person's true power does not come from controlling everything around them. It comes from mastering their own response to whatever appears. Your preparation belongs to you. Your decisions belong to you. The way you treat others and the standards you hold yourself to belong to you. But the timing of success, the reactions of other people, and the circumstances that appear along the way exist beyond your complete command. Confusing these two categories creates unnecessary suffering because you begin demanding ownership over things that were never yours to control. Think about someone standing outside during a storm, becoming angry because the clouds refuse to move. The frustration may feel powerful, but it has no influence over the sky. The storm continues exactly as it was going to continue. The only thing affected is the person's own state of mind. Life often creates similar situations. A person may spend years fighting against delays, setbacks, and situations they cannot change, believing that resistance itself is a form of strength. But sometimes the strongest response is not pushing harder against what cannot be moved. Sometimes strength is the ability to remain steady while adjusting your direction with awareness. This does not mean becoming passive or accepting less than you deserve. There is a difference between acceptance and giving up. Giving up comes from believing that your actions no longer matter. Acceptance comes from understanding where your actions matter most. A person who accepts reality can actually make better decisions because they are no longer using all their energy wishing circumstances were different. They can see situations more clearly. They can respond instead of reacting. They can focus on the next useful step rather than becoming trapped by the outcome they hoped would happen. A gardener understands this principle naturally. After planting a seed, they can prepare the soil, provide water, and protect the environment around the plant. They can create the conditions needed for growth. But they cannot force the seed to become a flower overnight. Digging into the ground every morning to check whether progress has happened will not speed up the process. In fact, constant interference may prevent the growth they were trying to create. Human development often works in the same way. Some changes require patience because they happen beneath the surface before they become visible. Many people become discouraged during these periods because they judge progress only by what they can immediately see. They assume that if their circumstances have not changed, then nothing meaningful is happening. But internal changes often appear before external results. A person may become more patient before their situation improves. They may become more disciplined before they achieve recognition. They may develop emotional strength before life gives them a reason to use it. These invisible changes are often the foundation that allows future success to become sustainable rather than temporary. Eventually, something subtle happens. You stop waking up each day feeling as though you must wrestle life into becoming what you want. You still move forward. You still take responsibility. You still make decisions with intention, but there is less tension behind your actions. Your energy becomes focused instead of scattered, and when your mind is no longer consumed by the endless struggle to control what cannot be controlled, you begin noticing possibilities that were hidden before. Sometimes, life does not begin moving in the right direction because you finally forced it to change. Sometimes it begins moving because you finally became calm enough to recognize the direction that was already opening in front of you. After you stop trying to control every outcome, another kind of change begins to appear. It is quieter, almost easy to miss, because it does not arrive through a dramatic achievement or a visible success. It appears in the way you experience moments when nothing seems to be happening. The silence that once felt uncomfortable begins to feel different. You no longer feel the same pressure to constantly fill your days with noise, activity, or endless attempts to prove that you are moving forward. The need to always be doing something slowly begins to lose its grip. And in that space, you begin discovering something that was difficult to notice before. Stillness was never the enemy. It was simply a place you had not yet learned how to understand. Many people avoid quiet moments because silence removes the distractions that usually keep difficult thoughts at a distance. When there is always another task to complete, another conversation to have, another piece of information to consume, there is little opportunity to truly observe what is happening within the mind. The constant movement creates the illusion of progress, but movement alone does not always mean growth. A person can spend years staying busy while never taking the time to understand the patterns that continue influencing their decisions. They can keep searching for something outside themselves while ignoring the thoughts and beliefs that shape the way they experience everything around them. Silence has a way of revealing these things because it removes the distractions that normally hide them. This is why quiet moments can feel uncomfortable at first. They create a space where there is nowhere else to look except inward. Old fears may appear. Unanswered questions may return. Thoughts that were pushed aside for years may suddenly become impossible to ignore. Seneca observed that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, reminding us that many of the battles we carry are created within the mind before they ever appear in the outside world. But this discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it is the mind finally creating enough space to process what it has been carrying. A person who constantly escapes their own thoughts will always need something external to create temporary peace. They may rely on achievement, attention, entertainment, or approval to feel complete. But when those things disappear, the same inner restlessness returns because the source of the problem was never outside. The Stoics viewed solitude differently. They did not see time alone as a punishment or a sign of isolation. They saw it as an opportunity to return to what truly matters. A mind that is constantly influenced by outside noise eventually loses its connection with its own judgment. It becomes easier to follow expectations, compare paths, and chase goals that were never deeply meaningful. But when a person learns to sit with themselves without immediately reaching for distraction, something important begins to develop. They become more aware of their own reactions. They notice which emotions are guiding them. They recognize which desires come from genuine values and which ones were created by fear, comparison, or the desire to be accepted. This awareness changes the way a person moves through life. Instead of immediately reacting to every thought, they begin observing those thoughts. Instead of automatically following every desire, they begin questioning whether that desire deserves their attention. There is a difference between having a thought and being controlled by it. There is a difference between experiencing fear and allowing fear to decide your actions. The quiet mind creates distance between what happens and how you respond. That distance is where discipline begins. It is where a person discovers that they have more control over their inner world than they once believed. If these reflections gave you a different way to view your own journey, consider subscribing. This place exists to explore the ideas that help us develop greater clarity, discipline, and wisdom in the way we approach life. Growth often follows a rhythm that is difficult to appreciate because it does not always happen where others can see it. A tree does not become stronger by constantly showing visible progress above the ground. Much of its development happens beneath the surface, where roots are expanding and becoming capable of supporting future growth. Human transformation often works in the same way. There are seasons where life appears unchanged from the outside, yet internally something important is being rebuilt. Patience is being developed. Perspective is becoming clearer. Old patterns are losing their influence. These changes may not receive recognition, but they are often the foundation for everything that comes later. The problem is that many people judge themselves only by visible results. They believe they are failing because they cannot point to something obvious and say, "This is how I have changed." But not all progress announces itself immediately. Becoming calmer is progress. Becoming more thoughtful before reacting is progress. Learning to sit with uncertainty without immediately searching for an escape is progress. These changes may seem small, but they completely alter the way a person experiences life. The external world may look exactly the same, yet the person facing it has developed a different relationship with everything around them. Eventually, silence stops feeling like an empty space that needs to be filled. It becomes a place where clarity can emerge. A quiet morning no longer feels like wasted time. A pause between goals no longer feels like falling behind. You begin to understand that not every season is meant for visible achievement. Some seasons exist for reflection, preparation, and rebuilding. Just as a seed spends time beneath the soil before anyone sees the first sign of growth, the human mind often transforms in ways that remain invisible before becoming undeniable. And perhaps this is one of the clearest signs that something inside you has changed. You no longer panic when life becomes quiet. You no longer assume that a slower season means you are losing your direction. You begin trusting that meaningful growth does not always need to be loud. Sometimes the strongest changes happen when nothing appears to be happening at all. In those moments, when the distractions fade and the mind becomes still, you begin meeting the person you have been becoming all along. As the inner noise begins to disappear, another change starts happening quietly. It does not arrive as a sudden realization or a dramatic moment where everything becomes clear. Instead, it appears in small observations throughout ordinary days. You begin noticing that many things you once believed were necessary no longer hold the same power over you. The desire to constantly add more starts becoming weaker. The need to collect more achievements, more recognition, more possessions, or more proof that you are progressing slowly begins to fade. At first, this can feel strange because so much of modern life is built around expansion. The message surrounding us is often that improvement means increasing everything. A better position, a larger income, more attention, more accomplishments, a more impressive image for others to see. But after a certain level of self-reflection, you begin to notice that constantly adding more does not always create a deeper sense of fulfillment. Sometimes the things we spend years chasing are not connected to what we truly value. They are connected to an idea of who we think we are supposed to become. A person may spend years pursuing success because they believe success will finally remove their insecurity. They may chase approval because they believe recognition will finally make them feel enough. They may collect achievements because they hope one more accomplishment will create a sense of peace that previous achievements failed to provide. But when they finally reach those goals, something unexpected happens. The satisfaction is often temporary. The excitement fades. The mind immediately begins searching for the next thing, because the deeper need was never truly about the achievement itself. It was about trying to fill something within. This is one of the reasons the Stoics placed such importance on understanding what actually deserves your attention. They recognized that human beings can easily become controlled by things that only appear valuable because society has assigned them importance. Wealth, reputation, status, and recognition can have practical benefits, but they cannot determine the quality of a person's inner life. A person can possess many external advantages and still feel restless. Another person can have fewer things and experience a greater sense of stability because they have learned what truly matters. The difference is not always found in what they own. It is found in what controls them. When you begin understanding this, your relationship with ambition starts to change. You do not lose your desire to improve. You do not stop setting goals or working toward meaningful achievements. Instead, your motivation becomes clearer. You stop chasing everything simply because it is available. You become more careful about where you place your energy because you finally understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources you have. Every choice requires a piece of your focus. Every desire asks for your time. Every pursuit demands a portion of your life. And when you begin seeing this clearly, you become less interested in wasting those resources on things that do not align with who you are becoming. There is a difference between wanting something because it genuinely adds value to your life and wanting something because you believe having it will change how others see you. The first comes from intention. The second often comes from insecurity. One creates growth. The other creates dependence. A person who constantly needs external achievements to feel worthy will always feel as though they are one step away from finally arriving. The finish line keeps moving because the mind keeps creating new conditions for happiness. But when you begin building your sense of stability from within, achievements become something you appreciate rather than something you desperately need. This shift can be difficult because letting go of unnecessary desires can feel almost like losing a part of yourself. Many goals may have been connected to your identity for years. You may have believed that a certain achievement would define your value or prove something important about you. But sometimes growth requires releasing the things that once motivated you but no longer serve you. A person who carries too much cannot move freely. The same is true mentally. When your mind is filled with endless expectations, comparisons, and desires, there is little space left for clarity. Think about someone carrying a backpack while walking through a long journey. At first, they may not notice the weight because they have become accustomed to carrying it, but after many miles, the burden becomes impossible to ignore. The solution is not always becoming stronger so that they can carry more. Sometimes the wiser choice is examining what is inside the backpack and removing what was never necessary in the first place. Human beings often do the same thing with their minds. They carry expectations from others, outdated versions of themselves, and desires that belong to a different stage of life. They continue carrying these things simply because they have carried them for so long. Eventually, a quiet freedom begins to appear. You no longer feel the same pressure to pursue every opportunity, impress every person, or become every possible version of yourself. You become more selective because you understand that saying yes to everything means giving less attention to the things that truly matter. Your life does not become smaller, it becomes more intentional. The noise begins to separate from what is meaningful. The unnecessary begins to fall away, and what remains is often much closer to the things you were searching for from the beginning. Perhaps one of the clearest signs that you are moving toward a better direction is not that you suddenly want more from life. It is that you finally understand what deserves your energy. You stop measuring progress by how much you can accumulate and start measuring it by how deeply you can engage with what matters. You begin choosing peace over constant pursuit, purpose over pressure, and meaning over appearance. The desires that remain are no longer demands placed upon you by fear or comparison. They become choices made with awareness. And when that happens, you are no longer being pulled in every direction by everything you could become. You are finally moving toward the things that were truly yours all along. Learning what truly deserves your attention requires another transformation, and perhaps this one is among the most difficult because it changes the way you see the experiences you once tried to avoid. It changes your relationship with difficulty itself. For much of life, people are naturally conditioned to believe that comfort means things are going well and struggle means something has gone wrong. When plans fail, when circumstances become complicated, or when an unexpected challenge appears, the first instinct is often to question why it happened. The mind immediately searches for what is broken, what should have been different, or what mistake caused the situation to appear. Difficulty becomes something separate from the journey, something that interrupted the path rather than something that was always part of it. But this way of seeing hardship creates unnecessary suffering because it places us in constant conflict with reality. Challenges are not unusual visitors that occasionally appear to disturb an otherwise perfect life. They are woven into the human experience itself. The Stoics understood that difficulty was not an indication that life had gone wrong. It was one of the places where character was revealed and developed. A person does not discover patience when everything moves according to plan. They discover patience when circumstances test their ability to remain calm. They do not discover courage when there is nothing to fear. They discover courage when fear exists, and they choose to act wisely anyway. This does not mean that hardship is enjoyable or that painful experiences should simply be ignored. Difficulty still hurts. Loss still creates sadness. Failure still creates disappointment. The Stoic perspective was never about pretending that challenges do not affect us. It was about refusing to allow those challenges to completely control our perception of ourselves and our lives. There is a difference between experiencing pain and becoming defined by pain. There is a difference between facing a difficult moment and allowing that moment to convince you that your entire future is hopeless. The meaning we attach to an experience often determines the influence it has over us. Two people can go through the same setback and walk away with completely different lessons. One person may see failure as proof that they are not capable. They may allow one mistake to become a judgment against their entire identity. Another person may experience the same failure and look for what it reveals. They may examine their choices, learn from the situation, and use the experience to become wiser. The event itself is the same. The difference is the interpretation. This is one of the most important shifts that happens when a person begins developing greater inner stability. They stop asking only, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin looking deeper into what the situation is showing them. A difficult conversation is no longer automatically proof that a relationship cannot work. It may become an opportunity to practice honesty, patience, and understanding. A rejection is no longer automatically proof of personal failure. It may reveal a direction that was never truly aligned with who they were becoming. A setback is no longer simply a wall blocking their progress. It can become information that helps them adjust their approach. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. When you see obstacles only as enemies, every challenge becomes something you must defeat before you can move forward. Your energy becomes focused on resistance. You spend more time wishing reality were different than learning how to navigate it. But when you begin seeing challenges as teachers, your relationship with life becomes more balanced. You stop wasting energy fighting the existence of the obstacle and start focusing on the response it requires from you. Think about someone learning a difficult skill. In the beginning, mistakes feel frustrating because every mistake seems like evidence that they are not good enough. But with experience, the same mistakes become valuable. They reveal what needs improvement. They show where attention is required. The person does not become better because they avoided failure. They become better because they learned how to use failure as part of the process. Life often works in the same way. Many of the experiences that feel like setbacks while we are living through them become the exact experiences that shape our wisdom later. A person who develops this perspective becomes harder to break emotionally because they no longer interpret every difficult moment as a personal attack from life. They understand that challenges are not always signs that they are on the wrong path. Sometimes they are signs that they are being asked to grow in a way they have not experienced before. The obstacle may reveal impatience that needs attention. It may expose fear that has been controlling decisions. It may uncover a weakness that was hidden during easier seasons. This is why difficult moments often appear before major changes in a person's life. They force a deeper level of awareness. They require a person to examine not only what is happening around them, but also how they are responding internally. The external situation may not immediately change, but something within begins to shift. The person becomes less reactive. They become more thoughtful. They begin creating space between what happens and how they choose to respond. Eventually, hardship loses some of its ability to completely overwhelm them. Problems still arrive. Unexpected situations still create uncertainty, but they no longer automatically destroy their sense of direction. They understand that a difficult chapter does not represent the entire story. A single failure does not erase years of progress. A painful moment does not determine the value of their entire journey. And perhaps this is one of the clearest signs that a person is preparing for a new chapter in life. They are no longer waiting for every obstacle to disappear before they feel ready. They are becoming someone who can remain steady even when obstacles appear. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this idea when he wrote, "The obstacle is the way," reminding us that difficulties are not always barriers preventing progress, but often the very experiences that shape our ability to move forward. They are learning that strength is not created by avoiding difficulty. It is created through the way they meet it. The challenge itself may not change, but the person facing it does. And when that happens, situations that once seemed impossible begin revealing something different. They become opportunities to discover a level of patience, discipline, and clarity that was already within them. When your relationship with hardship begins to change, another transformation quietly follows. The need to constantly compare your life with the lives of others begins to lose its power. This change is subtle because comparison often feels natural. It happens so quickly that many people do not even recognize how much influence it has over their emotions. A simple glance at someone else's progress can create doubt. Another person's achievement can suddenly make your own efforts feel smaller. Someone else's success can make you question whether you are moving quickly enough, whether you started too late, or whether you are somehow falling behind. The difficult part is that comparison often disguises itself as motivation. It can appear as ambition or self-improvement, but underneath it, there is often a quiet dissatisfaction with where you currently stand. Instead of using another person's journey as inspiration, the mind turns it into a measurement of your own worth. You begin looking at someone else's chapter and judging yourself for not being in the same place. You see the result, but you rarely see the years of preparation, the struggles, the opportunities, or the circumstances that created that result. You compare your entire reality with a small part of someone else's life. This creates a form of suffering that has nothing to do with your actual situation. A person can be making meaningful progress and still feel unsuccessful because they are constantly looking in another direction. They may be building discipline, developing new skills, improving their mindset, and moving forward slowly, yet none of it feels valuable because someone else appears to be further ahead. The problem is not always the speed of their journey. The problem is that they are using a path that was never designed for them as the standard by which they judge their own. The Stoics understood that every person moves through life carrying different circumstances. Each person begins from a different place, faces different challenges, and receives different opportunities. Measuring one life against another without understanding these differences creates an unfair judgment. It is like comparing two trees and deciding that one is better because it grows taller, faster, while ignoring that they are planted in completely different environments. One may receive more sunlight, another may need deeper roots before visible growth appears. Their development follows different conditions, but both are still growing according to their own nature. Human beings often forget this because society encourages a shared timeline. Certain achievements are expected at certain ages. Certain milestones are treated as evidence that someone is successful. When another person reaches one of those milestones before you, it can create the illusion that they are ahead and you are behind. But life is not a race where everyone starts from the same line and follows the same path. People are shaped by experiences that cannot be measured from the outside. The struggles someone overcame, the lessons they learned, and the personal growth they developed are often invisible. Eventually, a shift begins to happen. You stop searching constantly for evidence that you are keeping up. You stop needing to know whether someone else is moving faster than you. Your attention slowly returns to the only journey you can truly influence, your own. This does not mean you stop appreciating other people's achievements. It does not mean you become indifferent to learning from those who are ahead of you. There is still value in observing, admiring, and gaining inspiration from others. The difference is that their progress no longer becomes a reason to question your own. A person who has developed this mindset begins to understand that someone else's success does not take anything away from them. Another person's opportunity does not mean fewer opportunities exist for you. Another person's progress does not prove that your own progress is insignificant. The world is not a place where one person's growth automatically creates another person's failure. There is enough space for different journeys, different timelines, and different forms of achievement. This realization creates a powerful sense of freedom because comparison consumes a tremendous amount of mental energy. Every moment spent wondering whether you are behind is a moment that could have been invested into your own development. Every thought spent analyzing someone else's path takes attention away from the actions that could improve yours. When comparison begins to disappear, that energy returns. You become more present with your own decisions. You become more focused on what you can build, improve, and understand. As comparison begins to lose its influence, another realization starts to emerge. It is quieter, but it reaches much deeper. You begin understanding that the person you are today is not someone you need to escape before you can finally become better. For years, it is easy to believe that your current self is only a temporary version waiting to be replaced. You imagine that peace will arrive later, after you become more successful, more confident, more disciplined, or more impressive in the eyes of others. The future version of yourself becomes the person you admire, while the present version becomes someone you constantly criticize. Slowly, without even noticing it, your entire life becomes a struggle against the person who is actually carrying you toward that future. As Carl Jung explored through the process of self-development, meaningful growth begins with facing yourself honestly rather than rejecting the parts of yourself that need understanding. The path forward does not begin by creating war within yourself. It begins by developing awareness, acceptance, and the wisdom to grow from where you already stand. This creates a difficult contradiction. You want to grow, but you are building that growth on a foundation of rejection. You want to improve your life, but every mistake becomes another reason to judge yourself. You want to become stronger, but your motivation comes from believing that who you are right now is not enough. This way of thinking can create temporary progress because pressure can force action, but it rarely creates lasting peace. A person can achieve many things while still feeling like they are constantly falling short because the standard they are trying to reach keeps moving further away. The Stoics approached self-development from a different perspective. They did not see improvement as a process of destroying the person you currently are and replacing them with someone completely different. They saw it as a process of understanding yourself more clearly and bringing your actions closer to your highest values. Growth begins with awareness. Before you can change something, you must first be willing to see it honestly. This requires a certain level of acceptance, not because everything about yourself should remain the same, but because meaningful change cannot come from refusing to acknowledge reality. There is an important difference between accepting yourself and becoming comfortable with staying the same. Acceptance is not the absence of ambition. It is the foundation that allows ambition to become healthier. A person who accepts themselves can look at their weaknesses without feeling destroyed by them. They can recognize areas that need improvement without turning those areas into proof that they are inadequate. They can make mistakes without allowing those mistakes to define their identity. This creates a stronger form of discipline because their actions are guided by understanding rather than self-punishment. Think about the difference between someone caring for a garden and someone constantly attacking it because it is not already perfect. A gardener does not improve a plant by becoming angry that it has not grown faster. They observe its condition, understand what it needs, and provide the right environment for growth. Human beings often need the same approach toward themselves. They need honesty, patience, and consistent effort. Harsh criticism may create movement for a short period, but long-term transformation requires a relationship with yourself that allows learning and improvement to continue. This shift changes the reason behind your goals. You may still want to become healthier, wiser, more capable, or more successful. You may still pursue difficult things and challenge yourself in meaningful ways. But the motivation becomes different. You are no longer trying to become better because you believe your current self has no value. You are improving because you recognize that your abilities deserve to be developed. You are not running away from who you are. You are building upon who you already are. This difference may seem small, but psychologically it changes everything. When growth comes from self-rejection, every achievement becomes temporary relief. You reach a goal, feel satisfied for a moment, and then immediately create another reason you are still not enough. The mind remains trapped in a cycle where success never creates peace, because success was never the real goal. The real goal was escaping the feeling of inadequacy. But when growth comes from self-respect, achievements become expressions of your values rather than attempts to prove your worth. A person who reaches this stage begins treating themselves differently. They become more patient with their progress. They stop expecting perfection before allowing themselves to feel proud of their effort. They understand that becoming stronger is a process, and every stage of that process has value. The person who is learning, struggling, and improving today is not an obstacle standing in the way of the future self. That person is the one creating it. This is where a deeper form of confidence begins to develop. It is not the confidence that comes from believing you will never fail. It is the confidence that comes from knowing failure will not make you abandon yourself. You trust that you can learn, adapt, and continue moving forward. Your identity is no longer dependent on constant proof. It becomes rooted in your ability to respond wisely to whatever life presents. And perhaps this is one of the most important signs that a person is entering a new chapter. They stop waiting to become someone else before they allow themselves to move forward. They stop believing that happiness exists only after some future transformation is complete. They continue growing, but they no longer fight against the person doing the growing. The inner conflict begins to weaken because the same person who wants improvement is no longer the person constantly creating pain. The journey becomes lighter, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer carrying the additional weight of constantly rejecting yourself. You can focus your energy on learning, creating, and becoming better without the exhausting belief that you must first prove you deserve to be there. And when that shift happens, something powerful changes within you. You are no longer trying to become worthy of a better life. You are developing the wisdom and strength to fully experience the life you are already building. Accepting yourself does not mean that you stop striving for improvement. It does not mean that you become comfortable with remaining exactly where you are, or that you lose the desire to build a better life. In fact, something unexpected often happens when a person finally stops fighting against themselves. They become capable of directing their energy with much greater focus. The energy that was once wasted on self-criticism, comparison, and constant doubt becomes available for meaningful action. Instead of spending every day trying to prove that they are enough, they can finally invest that effort into becoming better. This is where many people misunderstand acceptance. They believe that if they are kind toward themselves, they will lose their ambition. They fear that without constant pressure and criticism, they will become lazy or stop progressing. But growth built on fear is not the only form of discipline. There is another type of discipline that comes from clarity. It does not come from believing you are behind or broken. It comes from understanding what matters to you and choosing to move toward it consistently. The Stoics emphasized this balance between effort and detachment. They did not suggest abandoning goals or avoiding difficult challenges. They encouraged people to pursue excellence while remaining free from becoming controlled by the final outcome. A person can give their best effort without allowing success or failure to determine their entire sense of peace. This is a difficult lesson because human beings naturally want certainty. They want guarantees that their work will lead to the result they desire. They want confirmation that every sacrifice will eventually be rewarded. But life does not always provide those guarantees. A person who depends entirely on external results will always feel unstable because their confidence is placed in things that can change at any moment. Praise can disappear. Opportunities can close, plans can fail, other people can change their opinions. When identity is built on these things, even small disappointments can feel like personal attacks. But when someone develops inner stability, their relationship with success changes. They still appreciate achievement, but they are no longer dependent on it to feel valuable. This creates a different kind of motivation. They continue working when nobody is watching. They continue improving when progress feels slow. They continue showing up even when the results are not immediately visible. Their actions are no longer controlled by the need for constant recognition. They are guided by commitment, values, and the understanding that meaningful things often require patience before they become visible. Think about someone learning a craft over many years. In the beginning, they may receive little attention. Their improvements may not be obvious to others. There may be moments where it seems like their effort is producing very little, but they continue because their connection to the process is stronger than their need for immediate validation. Over time, their consistency creates something that cannot be easily copied. Their skill develops. Their confidence grows. Their results eventually begin reflecting the work that was happening quietly all along. The same principle applies to personal growth. A person who has developed inner discipline does not need every day to feel successful in order to continue moving forward. They understand that some days are for progress, some days are for learning, and some days are simply for maintaining their commitment. They no longer judge their entire journey based on one difficult moment. They see the larger pattern instead of becoming consumed by temporary circumstances. This is where true confidence begins to form. It is not the confidence of someone who believes nothing will ever go wrong. That type of confidence is fragile because it depends on life remaining predictable. Real confidence comes from trusting your ability to respond when life becomes unpredictable. It comes from knowing that even if circumstances change, you can return to your principles and continue making thoughtful choices. A person with this kind of confidence no longer needs constant reassurance that they are moving in the right direction. They do not depend on external signs, praise, or immediate results to convince them that their efforts have value. Their actions become evidence. Their discipline becomes evidence. Their ability to remain consistent during uncertain periods becomes evidence. They begin to understand that the strongest proof of growth is not always found in the achievements they have already reached. Sometimes it is found in the way they carry themselves while working toward the things they have not reached yet. As Seneca reflected, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, reminding us that the person who quietly develops their character is often preparing themselves long before the results become visible. Growth is not only measured by the destination, it is revealed through the person you become while walking toward it. This shift also changes how others experience them. People begin noticing a certain steadiness, not because the person has become perfect or because they never struggle, but because they are no longer constantly seeking approval or reacting to every change around them. There is a calmness that comes from knowing who you are and what you are trying to build. That type of presence cannot be easily created through appearance alone. It develops through repeated choices, patience, and the willingness to continue even without immediate rewards. Eventually, the outside world often begins reflecting the internal changes that have already happened. Opportunities may appear because the person is more prepared to recognize them. Relationships may improve because they are no longer approaching others from insecurity. Progress may accelerate because their energy is no longer divided between action and self-doubt. The circumstances may not have transformed overnight, but the person facing those circumstances has become different. And perhaps that is one of the clearest signs that real change is taking place. You no longer need life to constantly prove that you are moving in the right direction. You begin trusting the process because you have learned to trust yourself. Your goals still matter. Your ambitions still exist. But they are no longer controlled by fear. They are guided by purpose. And when a person reaches that stage, they are no longer simply hoping to become stronger. They are already living from a place of strength. This is why someone can appear to be in the same place while actually being completely different. Two people can experience the same challenge, the same uncertainty, or the same disappointment, yet respond in completely different ways because their inner worlds are different. One person may immediately fall into frustration, fear, and hopelessness. Another may experience the same difficulty, but remain thoughtful, steady, and focused on what can still be done. The difference is not always found in the situation itself. It is found in the person meeting the situation. The Stoics placed great importance on this idea. They understood that a strong person is not someone who avoids difficulty or creates a life where nothing goes wrong. That kind of life does not exist. Challenges are part of being human. Unexpected events will happen, plans will change, people will disappoint us, circumstances will move in directions we never predicted. Strength comes from developing the ability to remain grounded when those moments arrive. A person who has reached this stage does not need life to constantly confirm that everything is going according to plan. They no longer believe peace can only exist after every problem has been solved. They understand that waiting for perfect conditions means waiting forever, because life will always contain some level of uncertainty. Meaning is not something that appears only after success arrives. Meaning is created through the way a person chooses to approach each moment along the journey. This changes the way they view their own struggles. A difficult season no longer feels like evidence that they have failed. A slow period no longer feels like proof that they are falling behind. They begin seeing these moments as part of the process that shapes them. The challenge is still real. The emotions are still real, but the person is no longer allowing temporary circumstances to control their entire identity. Perhaps the deepest transformation is realizing that the life you were waiting for was never only about reaching a certain destination. It was about becoming someone capable of appreciating and handling that destination when it arrived. Many people spend years imagining that one future moment will finally solve everything. They believe that once they achieve a specific goal, gain a certain level of success, or reach a certain stage of life, they will finally feel complete. But when the inner foundation has not changed, even the things they wanted most may not provide the peace they expected. The person who has developed inner stability begins approaching life differently. They still have dreams. They still want growth. They still work toward meaningful goals. But they are no longer placing their entire sense of peace in the future. They can appreciate where they are while continuing toward where they want to go. They understand that progress does not require constant dissatisfaction with the present moment. This creates a different relationship with ambition. Instead of chasing goals because they feel incomplete, they pursue them because they are aligned with their values. Instead of needing success to prove their worth, they allow success to become an expression of their effort and dedication. Their actions become more intentional because they are no longer controlled by fear of not being enough. And perhaps this is the final sign that change has already begun. You start realizing that you were not simply waiting for life to become easier. You were developing the strength, patience, and awareness needed to meet life differently. The future you imagined does not suddenly appear because everything falls perfectly into place. It is created through thousands of small decisions that often go unnoticed. It is created through moments when you choose patience instead of frustration, responsibility instead of blame, and wisdom instead of fear. One day, you look back and recognize something you could not see while you were living through it. The breakthrough was not the moment when everything outside of you finally changed. It was the moment when you stopped allowing everything outside of you to control who you became. The circumstances may have played a role, but the deepest transformation happened within. You became calmer. You became more aware. You became someone who could stand firmly, even when life remained uncertain. And that is often how real change arrives, quietly, gradually, without demanding attention. The person you are becoming is built in the moments when nobody else is watching, in the decisions that seem small, and in the choices that shape your character over time. Before everything finally works out, you may not receive the exact life you were hoping for immediately, but you begin receiving something even more important, the ability to meet that life with strength, clarity, and peace. The path toward a better life is rarely defined by one perfect moment. It is built through the quiet choices you make when nobody is watching, the patience you develop during uncertainty, and the strength you discover when life does not unfold exactly as you expected. The greatest transformation is often the one that happens within you long before the world around you begins to notice. Thank you for spending this time with Stoic Journal. Your presence here is a reminder that growth is not about becoming someone completely different. It is about returning to the wisdom, discipline, and clarity that were already within you. If this message connected with something you are currently experiencing, take a moment to watch one of the videos appearing on the screen. Another perspective may be exactly what you need for the next step of your journey. Until then, continue moving forward with patience, awareness, and strength. And remember, the person you are becoming is already being shaped by the choices you make today.